Have you ever really thought about what you are going to leave behind?
Oh, that's a big question right off the bat.
Right. But I mean, not the financial assets, not the real estate, or, the vintage watch you keep locked up in a safe.
Yeah, the tangible stuff is easy to pass down.
Exactly. I'm talking about the abstract, intangible legacy. Like if you had to pass down a specific trait, maybe uh, resilience or curiosity or courage to someone you love, how would you actually do it?
Well, it's incredibly difficult.
Because you can't just write, be brave on a sticky note and expect it to magically alter someone's character.
It just doesn't work. I
Yeah.
mean, we know from human behavior that character traits, they aren't transferred through instruction manuals.
Right,
They have to
right.
be forged. They actually have to be experienced. You have
Yeah.
to, put a person in a situation where they are forced to locate that trait within themselves.
And that right there is the exact premise of what we're unpacking today. So, welcome to today's deep dive. We are exploring this really fascinating narrative, a factual account known as The Secret of Lighthouse Island.
It's such a great subject.
It really is. And on the surface, if you just read the summary, it sounds like a straightforward classic adventure: two friends, an old map, a secret island, and a hidden treasure.
But the treasure hunt is a Trojan horse.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, the true focus of our discussion today is really the psychological architecture of a rite of passage. We're going to track the protagonist, this young man named Alex, as he moves from this state of raw, unfiltered, like almost frantic excitement into a state of profound emotional maturity and peace.
And I want you, the listener, to think about a time you went looking for one thing, maybe a specific career milestone, or a relationship, or a material goal.
And you're totally convinced it was the ultimate prize.
Yes, convinced it was everything, only to find something completely different that just, completely rewired how you saw yourself.
That tension right there between what we think we want and what we actually need to grow, that is the engine of this entire story.
So let's just jump right into the source material. It starts with a young man, Alex, who is looking through his late grandfather's belongings. His grandfather's name was James Cooper, and inside an old book, Alex finds a map.
And it's described very specifically in the text. The paper is yellow and brown.
Yeah, it's old.
It's genuinely aged. It's an artifact. I mean, this isn't something hastily scribbled on a napkin after dinner. It's something that has been deliberately hidden and preserved.
Deliberate is the key word here, for sure, because there is a note right next to the drawing of an island on this map, and the note reads, "The treasure is inside the light."
Which is such a hook.
Oh, it's incredible. Now, if I'm a young person and I find a yellowed map in my deceased grandfather's book hinting at treasure inside a light, my brain immediately stops functioning rationally.
Oh, yeah. Completely hijacked by anticipation.
Yeah, exactly. And that is exactly Alex's reaction. He is consumed by this pure thrill of the mystery. So he immediately goes to his friend, Sarah, and just flat out declares they are leaving the very next morning.
We really need to pause and examine Alex's emotional state right here at the starting line, though.
Let's do it.
Because he is exhibiting what we might call unanchored momentum. His energy is entirely outward-facing. He's projecting all of his focus into the future toward this physical reward, this, vague concept of treasure.
Right.
He isn't thinking about the how or the why. He is entirely possessed by the what.
Which is such a recognizable human state, isn't it? It's that intoxicating rush of a new obsession. You're like a kid waking up on a holiday morning.
Yes, pure, unadulterated anticipation.
You literally don't care about the logistics at all. But thankfully, he has Sarah, because Alex says, "Hey, we should go to Lighthouse Island. It's maybe an hour by boat." And Sarah just looks at him and says, "Alex, we don't have a boat."
It's so funny. It's a brilliant contrast in dispositions. Sarah represents the reality principle here. Alex is operating purely on the pleasure principle, just the desire for the adventure and the reward. Sarah immediately introduces friction. She points out that enthusiasm, it doesn't negate the laws of physics or the necessity of transportation.
Right. And I actually want to push back on Alex's reaction here a bit, because I understand the excitement. I really do. But there's a kind of blindness to his enthusiasm that almost borders on arrogance.
That's a good point.
Like he's so focused on the prize that he's completely ignoring the practical reality of the world around him. Honestly, if Sarah wasn't there, he'd probably just start swimming.
He really might have.
It makes you wonder how often our own excitement about a new venture totally blinds us to the actual requirements of executing it.
Well, that's a very fair critique of his state of mind. because manic excitement, it's actually a form of tunnel vision.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, when your brain is flooded with dopamine at the prospect of a reward, it actively suppresses the neural pathways responsible for risk assessment and logistical planning.
Wow, so he literally can't see the obstacles.
Exactly. So Sarah's pragmatism isn't just helpful, it's an essential counterbalance. You
Mhm.
see this dynamic in successful business partnerships, in marriages, in like any collaborative endeavor.
You need the visionary who sees the map.
Right, but you desperately need the operator who asks how you're actually going to cross the water.
And we see that dynamic play out perfectly in their preparation, because once they actually manage to secure a boat ride for the next morning with Alex's cousin Tom, they have to pack.
Yes, the packing list.
The packing list is so revealing. It tells you everything you need to know about where their heads are at. Sarah prepares the items necessary for biological survival. She packs sandwiches, water, and apples.
She's preparing for a physical reality.
Hmm.
She understands that bodies get hungry, bodies get thirsty, and an adventure requires fuel.
Right. And then we look at what Alex packs. He brings the map, obviously. He brings a flashlight. And then he brings his grandfather's old compass.
This is such a fascinating detail.
It is. The text notes that his grandfather gave it to him when he was a child with a very specific piece of advice. He said, Alex, always know where you're going.
Always know where you're going.
Yeah. But I find this detail absolutely fascinating and also a bit perplexing. Because why bring a compass? I mean, the island is a known entity. It's 45 minutes away. They have cousin Tom driving the boat.
Right, they are navigating the open ocean.
Exactly. So what is the function of the compass in this exact moment?
Well, to understand the compass, we really have to look past its literal navigational utility. In the context of this narrative, the compass is the first major psychological anchor.
Okay, unpack that for me.
Think about the grandfather's advice. Always know where you are going. He didn't say always know which way is north. He said know where you're going. It's an instruction regarding intentionality.
Ah, so it's about inner direction, not geographical direction.
Exactly. Because Alex is currently like a tornado of excitement. He is spinning out in a dozen different directions, fueled entirely by adrenaline. The compass is a physical reminder of a deeper purpose.
Oh, I love that.
It foreshadows that the true challenge of this journey isn't going to be locating the island on a grid. The true challenge will be finding his emotional center when he finally confronts whatever is waiting for him in that lighthouse.
So it's the grandfather's way of ensuring Alex brings a piece of grounding wisdom with him into all this chaos.
Precisely. It sets the stage for the ending.
That reframes the entire morning for me. So they have their supplies, the physical sustenance from Sarah, and the map and compass from Alex. They head down to the river early the next morning to meet cousin Tom.
It's early, so the air is cool.
Yeah, before the sun gets too hot. And this begins the phase of crossing the threshold. They step onto Tom's boat for a 45-minute ride across a small river.
The concept of the threshold is vital here.
How?
Well, in almost every significant human experience, there is a transitional space, like a waiting room before a medical diagnosis, or the flight before the vacation, or the boat ride before the island.
It physically separates them from the safety and familiarity of their daily lives.
Exactly. The boat creates a closed system. Once they're on the water, their immediate escape routes are cut off.
And the environment of this threshold crossing is incredibly deceptive because it's described as beautiful. The water is blue, it's remarkably calm, and they can see these flashes of small silver fish swimming just beneath the surface.
It feels very inviting.
It feels like a leisure cruise. But the narrative doesn't let them enjoy that peace for long because Tom, who is piloting the boat, decides to share what the locals actually think about Lighthouse Island.
Tom acts as the voice of societal anxiety here. He isn't malicious, but he introduces the collective folklore of their community.
Right. He tells Alex and Sarah that the lighthouse is 100 years old. He emphasizes that it is completely empty, that nobody has lived there for many, many years.
And then he drops the final heavy detail.
Yes. The locals consider the island scary.
Scary. That word completely shatters the idyllic atmosphere of the blue water and the silverfish.
It really does. And Sarah's reaction is immediate. Her pragmatism, which served her so well when she was packing sandwiches, now turns into acute apprehension.
Because if the locals say it's scary, there must be a practical reason why.
Right. But for Alex, this is the crucible moment. Up until this point, Alex hasn't had to be brave. He's only had to be excited.
That is a crucial distinction. Excitement is easy. It's a passive state triggered by the promise of reward.
Yeah.
Bravery, however, is an active choice. Bravery cannot exist in a vacuum. It requires the presence of fear.
So Tom's rumors introduce the fear.
Yes. And suddenly, Alex's abstract desire for adventure is brought into direct conflict with a very real, very human instinct for self-preservation.
And look at how Alex responds. He doesn't panic, but he doesn't ignore the fear either. He turns to Sarah and says, "Don't worry, we are together. Everything is okay."
He steps outside of his own tunnel vision.
Exactly. He is no longer just the kid desperate to rip open a present. He is actually taking on the role of a stabilizing force for someone else.
Which is the first real indicator of his emotional growth. He is managing the environment, but he's also intensely focused on the task at hand. While they are still on the boat, moving toward this scary place, he goes back to studying the map.
He is trying to impose order on the unknown.
He really is.
Let's talk about what he sees on that map. He notes the scale. The island is small, about 2 kilometers across. There is a beach on the south side where Tom will drop them off. In the center, surrounded by a dense forest, is the lighthouse.
But then his eyes catch a tiny detail he hadn't focused on before.
Right. Near the lighthouse, there is a small symbol. It looks like a door, or possibly a cave.
Sarah's reaction to this symbol is fascinating. Despite her newly awakened fear from Tom's rumors, the idea of a cave suddenly sparks her curiosity.
She says, "A cave." That is very exciting.
Yeah, the potential for discovery momentarily overrides her anxiety.
But Alex's reaction is what really caught my attention. Because he is the one who has been driving this entire expedition with relentless enthusiasm. But when he looks at that symbol, a cave or an unknown door, he pauses. He looks at Sarah and replies, "Or very dangerous."
It's a moment of profound, sobering reality.
It really is. It's that exact feeling you get when you've been hyping yourself up to do something difficult, maybe giving a massive presentation or confronting someone about a serious issue.
You spend days feeling empowered and ready.
Right. And then the moment before you step into the room, the adrenaline crashes, the reality of the stakes hits you, and you think, wait, what are the actual consequences of this?
Alex is walking an incredible emotional tightrope right now. The fantasy of the treasure hunt is colliding with the physical danger of an abandoned, isolated location.
You know that exact feeling of just, what have I gotten myself into?
Exactly. But the key here is that he doesn't tell Tom to turn the boat around. Recognizing danger isn't cowardice, it's intelligence.
Wow.
Choosing to proceed, despite that recognition, is the very definition of courage. He acknowledges the danger, accepts the risk, and reaffirms his commitment to the journey.
Which brings us to the actual arrival. The boat hits the white sand of the South Beach. The abstract rumors are about to become a physical reality.
But before Tom leaves them, he introduces a massive structural constraint to their adventure.
The time limit.
Yes. He tells them he will wait on the beach, but they only have about 3 hours before the afternoon wind arrives. After that, the water gets too rough. 3 hours.
The introduction of a strict time limit, the ticking clock, it fundamentally alters the psychology of the experience.
It really does. Without a time limit, an exploration can be leisurely. You can wander, you can retreat, you can hesitate.
But a 3-hour window forces a prioritization of action.
It demands focus. It means they cannot succumb to paralysis if they get scared, because inaction means they fail the mission entirely.
It really turns up the heat. So they leave the safety of the beach, they leave Cousin Tom, the blue water, and the open sky. They find a path marked by a large gray rock, and they step into the forest.
And the text makes a point to describe how drastically the atmosphere shifts the second they enter the trees.
Yes, the temperature drops. It's cool. But more importantly, it is intensely, heavily quiet.
We often associate danger with loud noises, alarms, sirens, shouting. But from an evolutionary standpoint, sudden, profound silence in a natural environment is deeply alarming.
Why is that?
It usually means predators are near. Sensory deprivation, or a severe reduction in sensory input like they experience in this quiet forest, it forces the brain to amplify whatever stimuli it does receive. It creates an echo chamber for anxiety.
And that echo chamber goes to work on Sarah immediately, because the quiet is broken by a sound, a snapping twig, a rustle.
Sarah freezes.
She hears what sounds like footsteps. She points out the terrifying logic of their situation. Like, they are supposed to be completely alone on this island, but she is hearing someone or something walking near them.
This is the moment where the rumors Tom shared on the boat metastasize into active terror. The abstract scary becomes a concrete auditory threat.
Now, I want to play devil's advocate here for a moment.
Go for it.
I look at this scene. 2 kids alone in a dense, silent forest on an island with a creepy reputation. hearing footsteps racing against a 3-hour clock. And I have to ask, what was the grandfather thinking?
That's a fair question.
Right. I mean, I know we're framing this as a beautiful lesson in bravery, but from a practical standpoint, sending your grandchild into an isolated, potentially dangerous environment based on a cryptic note seems wildly irresponsible.
It does seem that way at first glance.
What if that wasn't a bird? What if it was a trespasser? What if they got hurt and missed the boat? Is this quote-unquote designed experience actually just negligent?
It's a highly valid concern, and it strikes at the core of how we view risk in modern society. We have heavily sanitized the developmental experience.
We really have.
We try to eliminate all variables that could cause distress. But if we analyze the grandfather's intent, he is relying on the concept of managed risk and productive struggle.
Productive struggle. Tell me more about that.
In developmental psychology, productive struggle is the process where a person faces a challenge that is just slightly beyond their current level of competence.
Okay.
It requires them to stretch, to experience frustration, and to self-regulate. If the challenge is too easy, there is no growth. If it is genuinely lethal, there is trauma.
Ah, I see the balance.
Right. So the grandfather, assuming he knew the island well, knew it was essentially deserted despite the rumors, and knew it was small enough to navigate safely, he calculated that the perception of danger would be high, while the actual danger was relatively low.
He needed the environment to feel threatening so that Alex could practice overcoming the fear response.
Exactly. The fear is the feature, not a bug. The grandfather utilized the island's creepy reputation as a tool.
That makes so much sense. And look at how effective it is. When Sarah panics at the footsteps, Alex doesn't run. He stops, listens, and rationalizes.
He steps up as a leader here.
He does. He whispers to her, "It is probably an animal, a bird or a small rabbit." He takes the terrifying unknown and shrinks it down into a mundane, manageable reality. He uses logic to dismantle the panic.
It's incredible to compare the Alex, standing in that cool, dark forest, calmly reassuring his friend, to the Alex from yesterday morning.
The one who was essentially vibrating with manic energy, ignoring the fact that they didn't have a boat.
Yes, the transformation is already happening. The environment is forcing him to ground himself.
So they push through the fear, they push through the forest, and finally, the trees break. They see it, the 100-year-old lighthouse.
It's described as this imposing ruin. Tall, white, but decaying. The paint is peeling, the windows are shattered. It stands as a monument to isolation and the passage of time.
They've reached the X on the map, but of course it's never that simple. They approach the base of the lighthouse and they find a heavy wooden door. And secured to that door is a massive rusted lock.
They pull on it, but it doesn't move.
They have no tools to break it. The physical momentum of their journey hits a brick wall.
This is a classic narrative obstacle, but psychologically it serves a very specific function.
Which is?
Well, the journey through the forest was a test of emotional fortitude, right? Managing fear. The locked door is a test of intellectual persistence. When brute force fails, you have to pivot to observation and critical thinking.
And here is where Sarah shines again. She has been incredibly observant the entire trip. She saw the gray rock marking the path earlier. Now she looks closely at the door and spots a carving in the wood.
It's a symbol. A circle with 3 lines intersecting it.
She remembers it immediately. It perfectly matches the symbol Alex had seen on the map, the one they thought might be a cave or a door.
So Alex pulls the map out. Now that they have context, he looks closer at the symbol on the paper. And written next to it, in tiny, almost invisible words, is a phrase. Look where the light does not shine.
Look where the light does not shine. I just love this riddle.
It's great.
Because it requires a shift in perspective. You are standing at the base of a lighthouse. The singular defining purpose of this structure is to project light from its highest point out into the darkness.
It is an engine of illumination.
Yes. So if you are looking for the place where the light does not shine, where do you look?
You don't look up, you look down. You look at the foundation, you look at the dirt, the base, the shadow beneath the source.
It's a spatial puzzle, and Alex understands this immediately. He drops to his knees. He examines the stone foundation at the very bottom of the door. He feels around, and his fingers find a small hole carved into the rock.
And inside the hole, cold and heavy, is an iron key.
The lock is defeated. But let's go back to your earlier pushback about the grandfather's methods.
Yeah, you asked if he was being reckless.
Right. Think about the construction of this specific puzzle. Hiding a key in a small hole at the base of a locked door on an isolated island requires immense premeditation.
It really does. The grandfather deliberately engineered this bottleneck.
Yeah, he could have just taped the key to the map. Or better yet, just handed Alex the box in his living room years ago. Why force his grandson to decipher a riddle about circles and lines and shadows?
Because the riddle is a filtering mechanism.
Okay, tell me more.
The grandfather's ultimate message, as we will soon see, is about validating Alex's curiosity and bravery. But you cannot validate a trait that hasn't been exercised.
That makes sense.
If you just hand someone a trophy for a race they didn't run, the trophy is meaningless. The grandfather designed this puzzle to ensure that whoever found the key possessed the patience to observe, the intelligence to deduce, and the willingness to literally get down in the dirt to find the answer.
The struggle gives the reward its value.
Exactly.
You cannot appreciate the destination if you haven't earned the arrival. That makes perfect sense. The friction is the point.
It is entirely the point.
So Alex takes the iron key. He slides it into the heavy padlock. It turns with a click. The heavy wooden door creaks open, and they cross the final threshold.
They step out of the bright, wild external environment of the island, and they enter the internal historical space of the lighthouse.
The atmosphere undergoes a radical shift here. Outside, there is the wind, the rustling trees, the ticking clock of Tom waiting on the beach. Inside, it is dark, still, silent.
Alex has to click on his flashlight. The beam cuts through the darkness, illuminating dust motes hanging in the air.
The interior is described as strangely beautiful. There is old, heavy wooden furniture, a sturdy table, shelves lined with decaying books. Sarah whispers, "It is like time stopped."
It is a sensory deprivation tank of history. The external world has been shut out completely. They are now standing inside a time capsule.
But they can't stay on the ground floor. The original note on the map explicitly stated, "The treasure is inside the light, and the light room is at the very top of the tower."
So the physical ascent begins.
They stand at the base of a spiraling staircase made of cold, worn stone. They look up into the darkness.
The climb is arguably the most potent metaphor in the entire narrative. They are leaving the grounded, practical reality, the dirt, the foundation where the key was hidden, and they are elevating themselves into an isolated, heightened space.
Ascending a dark, narrow tower is an inherently claustrophobic and anxiety-inducing experience.
It really is.
And Sarah feels that anxiety intensely. The stairs are steep, the air is stale, and the darkness feels heavy. She is scared.
But instead of freezing or asking to turn back, she employs a fascinating coping mechanism.
What does she do?
As they start to climb, she begins speaking out loud. She says, 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. She starts counting them.
Wow.
This is a textbook example of cognitive reframing under duress.
Cognitive reframing.
Yes. When a human being is faced with an overwhelming, seemingly insurmountable task, like climbing a dark, dangerous tower into the unknown, the brain can easily spiral into panic. The macro picture is just too much to process.
So by counting the stairs out loud, Sarah is taking a massive, terrifying objective and shrinking it down into micro-actions.
She doesn't have to climb the whole tower. She just has to take step 4 and then step 5.
Exactly. She regains agency by focusing solely on the immediate sequential unit of progress. It is a brilliant strategy for emotional regulation.
And what I love is how Alex reacts to this.
Oh, this is great.
Because the old Alex, the kid manic with excitement from yesterday morning, he might have rolled his eyes or told her to hurry up or ignored her entirely.
Totally.
But this Alex, the one who has managed the fear of the forest and solved the riddle of the door, validates her. He hears her counting, recognizes she is managing her fear, and says, "That's a good idea. I will count too."
It is a moment of deep solidarity. He adopts her coping mechanism to show her she isn't alone in her anxiety. They are climbing as a unit.
So they count together. 4, 5, 6. And at step 8, something wonderful happens.
The claustrophobia breaks. They reach a small landing, and there is a window carved into the thick stone wall. They stop and look out.
The visual perspective they gain from this window is critical.
How so?
Well, from step 8, they can see the entire expanse of the island. They see the canopy of the dense forest they just navigated. They see the blue ocean stretching out to the horizon. And down on the south beach, they can see Cousin Tom, looking incredibly small, pacing near the boat.
The shift in perspective is staggering. When they were in the forest, surrounded by shadows and hearing footsteps, the island felt massive, overwhelming, and lethal.
Right. But from this elevation, looking down, the threats are neutralized.
The scary forest is just a patch of trees. The isolation is just geography. By physically elevating themselves, they gain a macro view that puts their fears into a manageable context.
It perfectly mirrors the internal elevation Alex is experiencing. He's rising above his initial, base instincts of manic greed and impulsive excitement, moving toward a higher, more philosophical vantage point.
The physical climb parallels his psychological ascent.
It's beautifully written.
They absorb the view, take a breath, and continue. 9, 10, 11. Finally, at step 12, they reach the top. They enter the light room.
The climax of the physical journey.
The room is circular, encased in glass. In the center sits the massive, complex apparatus of the lighthouse lamp. Sarah looks at it and is struck by its history.
She imagines what it must have been like a century ago. This massive, blinding light piercing through the storms, signaling to sailors out in the terrifying expanse of the dark ocean, telling them, "Here is solid ground. You are safe."
It's a beautiful thought, but Alex is focused on the mission. The treasure is inside the light.
He examines the heavy, clear glass of the central apparatus. Down at the base of the glass casing, he spots a small metal handle.
He grips it, turns it, and a small glass door swings open. He reaches his hand inside the casing, and he pulls out a small, heavy wooden box.
This is the moment of truth. Everything, the map, the comfort, the boat ride, the fear, the forest, the riddle, the stairs, it all culminates in this wooden box.
Alex sets the box down. He opens the lid, and this is where the story pivots so sharply that it almost gives you whiplash.
It really does.
I call this the collision of the false climax and the true climax, because Sarah, representing the expectations of a traditional adventure, looks into the box. She sees what's inside, and her immediate reaction is confusion. She asks, "Not gold, not jewels."
Her disappointment is entirely logical, though. The mystery phase of this journey operated on the promise of material reward. The cultural script for a treasure hunt ends with financial wealth.
You put in the physical effort, you endure the danger, and you are compensated with gold.
Exactly. So when the box doesn't contain gold, the transactional nature of the adventure seems to collapse.
But if you look at Alex, there's no disappointment. None. The text describes him looking into the box with immediate reverence, because the box isn't empty.
It contains a stack of old yellowed letters tied together, and beneath the letters is a photograph.
It's a black and white picture of a handsome, smiling young man standing right there in the light room. Alex turns the photograph over. On the back, written in familiar handwriting, is a name, James Cooper.
His grandfather.
The external treasure hunt dissolves in that exact second. The promise of jewels was a decoy, a lure.
The real discovery is a tangible piece of his family's history, preserved perfectly in the place his grandfather loved most.
This is the transition into the sentimental ending. The entire preceding adventure was an elaborate scaffolding designed to support this singular moment of interpersonal connection across time.
Alex carefully unties the letters. He realizes they are unsent. They are addressed to his father, James Cooper's son.
But as Alex begins to read the top letter, the scope of the message expands. He realizes this letter wasn't just for his dad. It was designed for anyone in his family who possessed the specific traits necessary to find it.
Let's look really closely at the contents of that letter because it is the ideological core of the narrative.
The grandfather writes with such warmth. He explains that the lighthouse was his absolute favorite place in the world. It was where he spent his happiest summers as a young man, looking out over the ocean, feeling the wind.
He wanted to share that exact feeling, that specific view, with someone he loved. But he knew he couldn't just describe it.
He says he hid this box for someone special, someone who loves adventure. And then he writes, "I knew you would find it one day."
The faith inherent in that sentence is staggering. I knew you would find it. He banked on the character of his descendants.
And then comes the thesis statement. The grandfather writes, "The real treasure is not gold or jewels. The real treasure is curiosity, the love of adventure, the courage to go on a journey. You have all of this. I am proud of you."
I want to dissect the psychology of that paragraph because it is a masterstroke of emotional validation. We talked earlier about the idea of productive struggle and the risk of sending a kid into a scary situation.
Yeah, we did.
If James Cooper had written this exact same letter, put it in an envelope, and handed it to Alex in the living room on a random Tuesday, what impact would it have had?
It would have been nice. It would have been a sweet, grandfatherly gesture. But it wouldn't have been transformative.
Exactly. Because if you tell a child they are brave while they're sitting safely on a couch, it's just a compliment. It's theoretical.
Right.
But think about what Alex just endured. He crossed the water. He faced down the rumors. He managed his own panic in a silent forest. He solved the cryptic riddle under the pressure of a ticking clock. He climbed the dark stairs.
Wow, yeah. When you list it all out like that.
By the time Alex reads the words, the courage to go on a journey. You have all of this. He doesn't have to wonder if it's true. He knows it's true as an empirical fact because he just proved it to himself an hour ago.
That is profound. The grandfather didn't just tell Alex he was brave. He built an arena for Alex to discover his own bravery. The journey transformed the grandfather's compliment from an opinion into undeniable evidence.
It is the ultimate gift. He didn't leave an object. He engineered a realization. The validation of being truly seen and understood by someone you revere is worth infinitely more than any gold coin.
Think about that to our listeners. Think about the most meaningful moments of your life. I guarantee you they weren't the moments you acquired a new possession. They were the moments you felt deeply, fundamentally understood by another human being.
James Cooper validated Alex's core identity. He saw the manic, curious energy in his grandson. And instead of telling him to calm down, he built a treasure hunt to honor it.
And with that realization, the narrative tension evaporates. The purpose of the island has been fulfilled, the puzzle is solved, the message is received. Now they have to reintegrate with the real world. They have to return.
The descent is quick. They pack up the letters and the photograph. They climb down the 12 stone steps, walk back through the forest, which suddenly doesn't feel scary anymore, just quiet.
And they emerge onto the white sand of the South Beach. Cousin Tom is waiting by the boat. The 3 hours are almost up. The wind is starting to pick up.
Notice how Tom immediately grounds them back in the transactional reality of the outside world. The first thing he asks is, "Did you find the treasure?" No gold.
Tom is still operating in the mystery phase. He expects the Hollywood ending, but Alex's response is the ultimate proof of his emotional evolution. Alex looks at Tom, smiles quietly, and says, "Something better."
That is a remarkably mature response.
Yeah.
He doesn't try to frantically explain the emotional resonance of the letters. He doesn't try to justify the lack of gold to someone who wouldn't understand.
He simply possesses the inner knowledge of what he found, and that knowledge is enough. The external validation Tom is looking for is completely irrelevant to Alex now.
So they climb back into the boat for the 45-minute journey home. And the contrast between the morning boat ride and the afternoon boat ride is a study in emotional transformation.
The environment reflects the internal state. The morning was characterized by tension, cool air, and terrifying rumors. The afternoon is characterized by the warm sun, gentle waves, and a sense of completion.
They're sitting on the boat, and Sarah looks at Alex. She can see he's quiet. She asks him if he's okay. And Alex tries to articulate the incredibly complex emotional state he is experiencing. He tells her, "I feel happy, and I feel a little sad."
Happy and a little sad. That is the definition of bittersweetness. It is the hallmark of emotional depth.
When you are a child, emotions are usually binary. You are thrilled or you are devastated, you are excited or you are terrified.
Right.
The capacity to hold two conflicting emotions simultaneously, joy and sorrow, is a fundamental milestone of maturity.
Sarah, in her infinite wisdom, completely understands. She nods and explains it to him perfectly. She says that feeling, the happy and the sad mixed together, is what it feels like to miss someone deeply while simultaneously feeling incredibly close to them.
It is the feeling of profound nostalgia. He is grieving the fact that his grandfather is gone. It's the sadness. But he's overwhelmed with joy because through the letters and the journey, he feels more connected to James Cooper than ever before.
The physical absence is painful, but the spiritual presence is incredibly comforting.
Let's compare this, Alex. The one sitting quietly on the boat, bathes in the afternoon sun, feeling the bittersweet weight of history, with the Alex from yesterday morning.
The kid who found the map and was practically vibrating with manic energy, demanding they leave immediately, ignoring the fact they didn't even have transportation. It's like looking at two completely different human beings.
The transformation is staggering. The Alex from yesterday was entirely dependent on external stimulation. His happiness was contingent on the promise of a shiny reward, a mystery to be solved, a dopamine hit of adventure. He was unmoored.
But the Alex on the boat returning home is peaceful. He is reflective. He tells Sarah, "He always knew what I needed. The need for external material validation has been entirely replaced by internal serenity."
You remember the compass? The compass he packed instead of sandwiches. The grandfather's advice? Always know where you are going.
Yes, the internal true north.
It is finally settled. The needle isn't spinning frantically anymore. The journey forced him to calibrate his internal compass. He knows who he is now.
He is the person who braved the forest, solved the riddle, and honors his family's legacy. He has found his emotional center.
And that is the ultimate takeaway of this story. The narrative outro beautifully synthesizes this lesson. As they sail home, The sky turns brilliant shades of orange, pink, and purple.
The narrator steps back and delivers the final thematic thought. The greatest treasures are not buried in the ground. They are memories. They are the capacity for love, and crucially, they are the courage to go on a journey.
The courage to be changed by an experience. As the boat glides toward their town, Alex isn't buzzing with adrenaline. He isn't plotting the next manic treasure hunt. He is simply holding his grandfather's letters close to his chest. The text notes that all he needs now is sleep.
It is the piece of a completed cycle. The factual account of this trick is a brilliant allegory for human development.
It really teaches us that bravery isn't about slaying mythical dragons or achieving impossible feats without fear. Sometimes, the most profound bravery a person can exhibit is simply having the courage to follow a map left by someone they love, stepping willfully into the frightening unknown, and trusting that the friction of the journey will yield the exact growth they need.
Even if it's not the reward they initially expected, James Cooper knew that. He understood the architecture of growth. He knew that the scary rumors of the island, the silence of the forest, the frustration of the locked door, and the terrifying climb up the stairs were all necessary ingredients.
They were the friction required to create the spark of self-realization in his grandson. He designed a masterpiece of an experience.
Which brings us back to the question you asked at the very beginning of our conversation. How do you pass down a trait like bravery? You don't hand it to them. You give them the tools, a map, a compass, and you give them the space to find their own true north.
You let them struggle productively, because the struggle is where the character is actually forged.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a lingering thought. A question to carry with you as you go about the rest of your week. We've spent this hour analyzing how James Cooper masterfully orchestrated this challenging, beautiful experience for Alex. He gave him the gift of a designed trial.
It's something we should all consider.
Exactly. Think about the people in your life, the people you mentor, the people you lead, the children you are raising, or the friends you love. When they are facing a challenge or when they desperately need to grow, what is your default reaction? Are you rushing in to remove all the friction?
Are you just handing them the answers to save them from discomfort?
Are you just giving them the gold? Or are you brave enough to step back? Are you willing to give them the gift of a map, a little bit of mystery, and the necessary space to prove their own courage?
That is the real challenge of legacy, knowing when to guide and when to let them climb the stairs in the dark on their own.
Well said. Thank you for joining us as we explored the profound lessons hidden on Lighthouse Island. Keep asking questions, stay curious, and we will catch you next time.